At what point is enough for these guys? Bumping a security guard and thinking, I don't know if he bumped them, pushed him, was an accident. But it's like, it just seems that trouble seems to find this guy everywhere he goes. But the NFL said, no, just an incident. But he'll do better next time, John. He'll do better next time.
Well, the Cowboys hope so. We kind of talked about it earlier in the week. I didn't think it was anything worthy of a suspension. The mitigating circumstance was that, as you mentioned, he's been in trouble before.
Yes.
And that's where the aspect of the potential suspension came in.
Right. It's not even that he's been in trouble before. It's just the statement of he recognizes and he needs to make better choices. And that, it's like, all right, that's right there where I'm like, if he's recognizing that, did he not learn it from the last time he made a mistake and the mistakes that he made before that? Like, if you're still saying I need to make better choices, that's where the league says, you know what? If you're still saying you need to make better choices, maybe you're not making good choices.
Well, that's probably fair to say. And there are, certain players that have a history and a clear trending of getting in trouble. The vast majority of players in this league, I always point out, get no trouble whatsoever. I think people don't realize that for whatever reason, because that kind of thing doesn't generate headlines. Look, I said, you want to talk about bad decisions? Why doesn't the NFL look in the mirror? I think the absurdity of, and that's what I put on Twitter, of getting in the investigation business is a huge mistake. From this league's perspective, do they have an ability to investigate more than the authorities? Do they have subpoena power? Can they compel people to tell the truth? It doesn't make any sense. But the problem is they don't educate their fan base and say, look, the legal process, and there's some warts, and you can make arguments from a political perspective there, but it's the process we have. And I think if you explain that to fans and say, look, we have to let the authorities do their job. Once they're finished doing their job, we can hand out any potential suspension or penalty or whatever in any incident. I think that should be the standard. I think it should always be the standard. Now, there's some explosive issues that you can't wait, and I have no problem with them invoking the commissioner's exempt list and putting people on the shelf in sort of a stasis until the legal process runs its course. But, man, you can't say, okay, the authorities say this is nothing, but we're going to suspend a guy. It's just dumb. It really is.
Yeah.
And I say that for every sport because it seems like the other sports are following the NFL's lead, which is incredibly dumb because this league has only gotten itself into trouble time and time and time again.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that this incident, by my count, I haven't seen a video or know anything that he, bumped the security guard. I don't know if he did it on purpose or just an accident or what. But it goes back to what I was saying before, the comment of he realizes he needs to make better choices. That's what kind of stood out to me is like, how many times is better choices the excuse that we can keep giving these guys? That's all.
No, I think that's fair, and I think that's more of an issue for the Dallas Cowboys than the league itself. I mean, you have to look at your employees and say, and that's with any industry, if they keep getting in trouble, you maybe got to start looking in a different direction. And we talked about the Cowboys earlier this week and their history of players who've been suspended, whether it's off the field incidents, substance abuse, PED use, what have you. They've had a bad history with that, and maybe they should take a look at how they judge players and red flags and things of that nature. But again, as a whole, when you talk about 53 players, 32 teams, 10 people on the practice squad, the percentage of players getting in trouble in this league is not great. And it's lesser. If you look at the FBI statistics, everybody can go look at them. They're public. They're online. NFL players get arrested at a lower rate than people of their age and the general public.
Mm-hmm.
I think that stuns people. And the NFL does a bad job of managing these types of situations. You're always going to have people get in trouble in any walk of life.
Yeah. No question. Oh, look, these guys aren't perfect. Let's throw that out there. Repeat offenders, though, sometimes, hey, guess what? Dennis Rodman got called for fouls, not because he always fouled you, but because he was guilty by association, just because of reputation sometimes, right? Your reputation sometimes precedes you.
Yeah, and that's something you have to live with.
So
you have
sometimes,
to live with your decisions.
right, sometimes even if you do something that's kind of paltry, it gets escalated because of who you are, guilty by association.
Well, I think that this is a perfect example. I think if this was another player that had a clean slate that didn't have a history, we wouldn't even be talking about it. It wasn't a huge incident. It was a little bump.
Right.
It wasn't that big of a deal. But because of his history, the microscope is on him, and he does get looked at a little stronger, and people take a closer look. And again, that's something he has to live with at this point because of his history.
We're talking with John McMullen, Football at 4 at JF McMullen on Twitter. Of course, you can give him a follow there. Yesterday, we kind of talked a little bit about the CBA thing, and there's a lot of questions that are kind of coming from this. Number one, I've read a lot that Jerry Jones is kind of the leading the way for the owner's side, right?
Well, he likes to. I mentioned that earlier this week as well. He's the most powerful owner in this sport. He likes the cameras. He likes when the red light is on. He likes to be in the newspaper. Nobody reads newspapers. He likes to be on websites. He likes to be in the news. He likes to be known, and he wants to be sort of known as the guy spearheading this deal, which a lot of people think is going to happen before the 2019 season starts. And I think that would be surprising to a lot of people. And I think he wants to take credit for it, to be honest.
Hey, and some of the things that we kind of hinted at yesterday or touched on, the former player benefits, that's something that's kind of being talked about here, player health and safety, the commissioner's discipline power as we're on this conversation. That's something that is being discussed as part of this CBA. Some other things too, but let's stop there for a second. Those three: commissioner's discipline power, player health and safety, which seems like it gets tweaked every offseason, and then the former player benefits. That seems like that's been going on forever.
Yeah, and it's changing because of the concussion issue and all the lawsuits and that things of that nature. So that's become more complicated. Personal conduct, I often talk. We just talked about it with Ezekiel Elliott. We just talked about the percentages. I think, and this is not just fans. This is a lot of the media who, to be honest, don't understand these issues. If you think 1,700 people are going to strike over less than 10, essentially, that get in trouble, and maybe you could argue are not treated fairly, I mean, you're going to give up your good-paying job for 9 other people and that maybe did some bad things and maybe got treated a little bit harshly? That's one of the most overblown things. They'll use it as a negotiating ploy.
Yeah.
We'll you sort of hem and haw, give back and forth. But I said, number one is the revenue split, and that is so by far number one. Number two is not even close. And if they get the number they want from a revenue split, they'll start giving up lots of things that are sort of ancillary issues that are white noise.
The article that I was reading suggested that because Tom Brady got burned by this, there might be more of an onus on how much power the commissioner should have in these decisions.
Again, that's media-driven nonsense, to be honest. It really is. It is. I mean, why is – again, we're talking about 1,700 players. Why does 1,699 care what happens to Tom Brady? They're going to give up $1 million salaries because they treated Tom Brady unfairly, arguably? It's not relevant to the rank and file. Now, you can believe it, and you could say, and a lot of players in this league believe Roger Goodell shouldn't have the power he does. But again, 99% of them, and that's a literal number, it's never going to affect them. So to say they're going to walk away from a year, potentially a year from a short shelf life to make a lot of money, I mean, at some stage, people have to use common sense. And again, I'm not even arguing with fans. Fans, I understand, don't get into the minutia of this stuff. Media people got to do better. That is not relevant, and it will not be relevant in this CBA.
A couple other CBA takeaways are the drug policy, the lifetime health care for players and their families. This is something that we talked about, players who were already retired, but talking about lifetime health care. And, that's something that you can't even believe that that's something they don't already have, right?
Well, I mean, NFL players have really good pensions. So if you compare it to normal people, I mean, it's pretty good. As far as health care, yeah, that's a big issue, and that should be a big issue. And that's fair to point that one out, and there'll be some wrangling there. I don't know, when you start talking about lifetime health care, what's your definition of that? How far does that go? Because we know health care costs in this country as a whole. I mean, the government can't get it right. They can never get it right. So to assume the NFL is going to get it right has to assume that there's going to be changes at the highest level in this country. It's probably not going to happen. So you do the best under the system you could potentially have. But we talk about a $13 billion industry. If you start talking about lifetime health care with the cost of our current system, even an industry that big could get bankrupt really, really quickly.
The other couple things on the docket. Let's stop at this one. The 18-game regular season. Now, it says the takeaway, no chance this happens. So why does it keep coming up on the docket? Why do they keep negotiating? If there's no chance and both sides don't – well, one side wants to do it, the other side doesn't want to, correct? I mean, that's obviously why it's not in. But one side doesn't feel enough to cause a big stink about it?
Well, I mean, the reason it's a big deal is revenue.
Right.
Roger Goodell's goal – as the commissioner, and he stated it time and time again, is to get this to a $25 billion business by the time he exits. To do that, you need new revenue streams. And where do you open them up? I mean, the league is pretty popular in the United States. Obviously, one of the issues, they're trying to open up London and international markets, even China. So those are some ways you can invent new revenue streams, but probably the easiest way is to add games and add relevant games. So if they can get to 18 and take away some of the preseason games, which Roger Goodell has already said they should do, but that's a clear strategy to get to 18, that's an easy way to increase revenue. The issue is, I don't know how you do it when you also have to pay, and from the league's perspective, let's be honest, it's lip service towards safety. I don't know how you argue to get to 18 games. I don't know how they're going to do it. It's too big of a hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? As a fan, I don't even know that I'm all excited about 2 more games. Like, I think by the end of the NFL season, we're ready for the playoffs. It's like it gets to that point where, like, the 2 extra games, I don't know that as a fan I'm all that excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big advantage the NFL has over the other major sports is the lack of games, to be honest, because every game is an event. And the more you increase them, the less that is. Now, it's never going to be 82. It's never going to be 162. So you don't have to worry about just the constant and every, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, they should all probably shorten their regular seasons, but they never will. From the NFL standpoint, every game is an event. And even that slight uptick from 16 to 18 would affect that at least a little bit. And I agree with you. I think I would argue 16 is probably too much. 14 was to me the best case. But we're obviously not going in that direction because it is about revenue and it is about TV. And if you have 2 more games, TV pays for 2 more games.
Mm-hmm. Franchise tag, 5th-year option, and fully funded rule. And this is something that, the takeaway here, which was the best way to combat the franchise tag, would get owners to agree to shorten the length of the rookie contracts. We kind of touched a little bit on that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and this is what I bring up, and this is what I brought up yesterday, when you talk about the revenue split, which is about 48% of gross revenues now, and then from there, once you get that number locked down, and the players probably want to get that to pass the NBA, which is 50-50 essentially. So if they can get to 51%, then it's just the shuffling. How do you want to split that 51%?
Yeah.
And do you want to give it to rookies? Do you want to give it to veterans? Well, we talked about that. You want to give it to veterans. You want to get it to proven players, but there's unintended consequences to that. And one of them, you mentioned the fully funded rule. That's something they probably could change. They probably should change. Because if you sign somebody to these big deals like the Eagles just did for Carson Wentz, you have to have the entirety of the guaranteed money in escrow. You have to have the ability to guarantee that money, put it in escrow the day he signs that contract. And that's not necessary, and that creates troubles for certain teams and certain players with certain ownership that might be not as financially well-heeled as other ownership, and that creates issues as far as free agency. I think that's an easy fix. Just get rid of it, and that would help the players.
Yeah, and the stadium credits we talked about yesterday and the revenue split you've brought up a couple times. They are the 9 Dan Graziano wrote this piece. It's at ESPN.com about the 9 biggest issues looming in this CBA. They're going to get together sometime in the next 2 weeks here to try to get this up. And, it's pretty important because both of us, John, we're doing this job sitting here in the lockout. And none of us want to see that ever again where there's no football, So it sounds like everything's good. It sounds like, but you never know.
No, you never know. And it looks good. It looks promising. I think it's trending in a positive direction. I think they are going to get a deal done before September, and it's not even going to be an issue.
Because, wait, real quick, because didn't Malcolm Jenkins say back in April that the talks won't be as simple this time?
He did, and I have tremendous respect for Malcolm. I have tremendous respect for a lot of players. Richard Sherman I brought up yesterday. And this is D. Maury Smith, and I've talked to him and in the past. And one of the issues is the players as a whole are not well educated to the issues at hand. And that's where it comes in with whether it's marijuana testing, which is irrelevant, personal conduct, which is irrelevant for 99% of the players. And I think the NFLPA as a whole has not educated their players to the actual real issues.
Right.
And real issue number one, we talked about best coaches in this league, Bill Belichick, number one, the chasm between number one and number two, the chasm between the revenue split and whatever you want to place on the number two issue is gargantuan. The only thing that matters is the revenue split. And if the players get that, it's not complicated at all.
Looks like some sad news, by the way, man, I remember watching Jared Lorenzen play at Kentucky, and he was a heck of a quarterback for the University of Kentucky and played with the Giants and has kind of bounced around into like sub-arena leagues, stuff like that. But his mother has confirmed that he passed away today at 38 years old. I mean, you remember Lorenzen? Did you ever cover Lorenzen when he was with the Giants?
Yeah, I mean, he was an interesting guy because he was about 280 pounds trying to play quarterback. So it was an interesting sight to see. And I don't know how he passed away. I don't know what the issues were, but he certainly struggled with his weight at times. And
I think he had gone into cardiac arrest and was in some over the weekend or something like that. He was developing some traction, but I guess I just being confirmed that. By the way, you mentioned he was playing quarterback at 280. He had got up to 500 pounds.
Yeah,
and he was still playing quarterback. By the way, have you ever seen videos of him? As recently as a year or two ago, he was playing in like some arena, like 3 league or something, or somewhere, I don't know. But he was still playing quarterback at that size.
Well, yeah, he had some talent. I mean, even when you get to that level, to be able to try out for the NFL, that says you have pretty significant talent when compared to the rest of college players, high school players as you move up. And it's pretty clear, as you mentioned, he struggled with his weight, and that probably derailed his career or any chance to be an NFL quarterback. I mean, it's just difficult to play at that size.
Yeah.
Certainly that position.
Hey, by the way, TJ McConnell signed with the Pacers. I know you're a big process guy.
Yeah, well, TJ's one of the
he's the last of the 10-win team.
Yeah. Well, TJ is certain. I think he was a success. I mean, I often criticize the Sixers in the Josh Harris era. Who's ever been in charge? I think one of the issues of this organization has been player development and maximizing the players. I think the two clear successes were T.J. McConnell and Robert Covington. So I give that guy all the credit in the world.
Yeah, T.J. agreed to a deal with the Pacers. 2 years, $7 million for T.J. McConnell. He's a Pacer, and he will be competing for the backup job there. And good to see TJ make a little money. I'll never forget one of the first times I was at a game, back in the process years. They were winning 10 games, and McConnell comes out. He's got the I mean, McConnell looked like he was a freshman in high school, that came out in the court with the varsity team next to some of them guys.
Yeah, and I'll say he didn't look like an NBA player. Everyone kind of mocked him when he first started to play. And you go back 2 years ago when Ben Simmons was struggling against Boston, and you could argue when he was on the floor, the Sixers were more effective.
Well, they started
really
him.
Maximized.
They ended up starting him in that series.
Yeah, he really maximized his ability. He became a solid backup NBA player. And like I said, I think that's one of the player development successes of an organization that hasn't had a ton of them in this era.
Tomorrow, John will be no football at 4, but football at 2:30 tomorrow. John will be jumping on with Hunter and Josh, who will be filling in for a special Sports Bash Power Hour and a half. And 2:30 tomorrow, get your football fix right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. John, enjoy your 4th, man.
Yeah, I told Josh I'll try not to be day drunk, but no guarantee.
All right, a little day load, football at 4 version at 2:30 right here on 97.3. Thanks, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
And John McMullen, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.